As a blogger, if I write content that doesn't resonate with the audience I'm trying to go after, I have a couple of options. One, I can complain that that audience is wrong, or I can change my approach to create content that's relevant for my audience, right? That's what we know as bloggers. However, there is a bit of a trend that's been going on for years, most prevalent among recipe blogs. And it stems from a past where people followed food bloggers. They followed bloggers in general. People would have their favorite bloggers. They would go back to their favorite blogs. They followed the RSS feeds. They got all the emails. They did everything. But that's not the way that Google search tends to work today. And that's not the way that users tend to behave. There is this article I want to share with you and talk a little bit about it. It was published on CNN not too long ago. And the whole article is kind of complaining about who we are as humanity, right? Who we are as people. And in fact, the headline is what it says about us when we want a cook's recipe, but not their humanity. Like, that is a scathing rebuke of our society, right? And it goes on. Let's just look at some of their subheadings, their subtitles here. Those long posts are actually useful. Now, here's what they're talking about. Probably seen this if you've been on the internet looking for a recipe. You click the link to the recipe, and then you get like a life story, the back history of that dish and how they first ate it at their grandmother's house in Italy, and that whole backstory, and a lot of family stories around it. Now, that's fun, right? And if I were following them as a person, that would be something I'd be interested in. But I'd be interested in it because I'm interested in them as a person, not because of the recipe that's at the bottom of the blog post. And yet, the reason I found them on the internet was because I did a Google search for a recipe. The article goes to explain how it's talking about the history, the culture of that food, which does have value, absolutely. But is it the value that I'm looking for? Let's go on further. Stripping the long portions, devalues a food blogger's work. Okay, fair enough, that may be true. But also, if I write an article about canoes and I include a 2,000-word backstory about my family history with canoes, if you don't care about it and ask me to remove it, that devalues the work I did to write that. But that doesn't make you wrong. It feeds into the commodification of food. Actually, it feeds into the commodification of content, right? Content is a commodity. And unless you can create a more useful version of that commodity, it doesn't really matter. And so the idea here being that, look, if I Google, hummus recipe, and there are 7,000 hummus recipes on the internet, and none of them include a backstory, then how are they different? That's a good question. If they include a backstory, they're different. But for me, who wants a hummus recipe, they're still not different. And so they're already commodities unless you can find a way to make your version of the recipe better. It ignores that recipes aren't just food, they're culture. Fair enough, but again, I didn't Google a hummus recipe because I wanted to know about culture. I Googled it because I wanted to know how to make hummus. See, this is the thing, is it's all going back to this concept of it's wrong that the reader doesn't want all that because all those things are valuable. I'm not saying that food bloggers need to stop doing what they're doing, although there are a lot of people watching this video who are probably shaking their heads saying, yes, please stop, I just want the dang recipe. I'm not saying you need to stop though. I'm not saying your culture isn't valuable. It absolutely is. I'm not saying your family and the history of that food isn't valuable. It absolutely is. What I am saying though, is it's not what I specifically searched for. The number one most important ranking factor that Google has and that all search engines have is relevance. How relevant is the content to the searcher's intent, to what they wanted, what they came for? That is the way the internet works. We're to a day where most of the views to a lot of our blog posts, to a lot of our websites, are coming through organic search. If you want someone to follow you, you probably need to have that done through social media platforms. Now, Pinterest can still drive you traffic. And if you have a big following on Pinterest, those people may care a lot about the culture and about the history of that dish. That's fantastic. So keep doing it. That's fine. Likewise, if people are following you on YouTube and they just love you, your personality, and they love learning how to cook from you as well, fantastic. Continue to give that to them. If you have an Instagram following and they love to follow you and they want to go read your articles, fantastic. But in the day of SEO, in the day of search, if you're trying to get traffic to your website by winning in search, It's going to be far more important to create content that is highly relevant to a specific search query. And so when I search for how to make hummus, what do I want? I want a recipe, not just a list of ingredients and 7 steps. It's more helpful if it is helpful to get a little bit of backstory. One of my favorite hummus recipes online, I don't even remember what site it's from, but I can always find it. It does talk about where this recipe came from, and that it came from, I think it was like their Syrian grandma, and it was the recipe that she always used in Syria. And to me, that tells me it's not just something, it's not like an Americanized version, right? And that means something to me. So I like that. In many recipes, I'll see things like specific tips for making this. I can't tell you how many recipes talk about like how to make a bread, and they say, okay, now cut the dough in half. And it's like, okay, but you had me like make it long and skinny. So which half? Is it the long way or is it the short way? And they never say, and there's not even a picture, right? So give me tips, give me hints throughout. Be very clear and explicit with your directions. If you want to give tips, it's about bread, and you want to talk about, the raising or the proving process, how long to prove, and just help me to learn how to be a better baker. In addition to teaching me how to make this specific type of bread, that's really good content because it's going to help me make a better version of this, right? The same would be true for any tutorial on the internet. I can write a tutorial that just lists 7 steps, or I can write a tutorial that goes in depth, has good pictures, and just like helps me to do a good job of whatever the steps are showing me how to do. That's infinitely more helpful than just listing the 7 steps and the tools required. We need to be thinking about recipe blogs the same way. We need to be thinking about all of our blogs the same way. What's the searcher's intent, and how do I create the most helpful piece of content that meets their need without putting a lot of other information around it? So sometimes it can be hurtful. It can feel frustrating when the rest of us come out and say, well, yeah, 90% of that article is fluff. You're like, that's not fluff. That's my family history. That's my culture, man. And that can be frustrating. That can be downright offensive, right? But when we say it's fluff, what we mean is it's not what the searcher came for.